Do you know what's going on with the...
Where the full screen is. So this is such a gotcha. But this is... I think if we did this.
Oh, there you go. You're the man.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I can't see it here. Oh, yeah. Hey, Brandon. But then I can't see it
a couple
here.
more mics from the.
So, do you want it to
We have
mirror,
two here,
yeah.
but maybe if we had one or two more.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. Maybe, could David do the housekeeping on the bathroom? David, you want to tell them where the bathroom is real quick?
Okay. Well, I might not have it for you.
I can just come over here.
This is working, right? Yes.
Close. We just have a mirroring issue.
Yeah, that's okay. Just to say, I mean, I think you've probably all found the bathrooms by now, but if you haven't, it is a little tricky. You have to go out of the door here, across the hall, out the back door, turn left, and then when you get to the next doorway, it's immediately on your left. So it's kind of complicated. And if, I said yesterday, if you don't come back after 2 days, we'll come and look for you, but hopefully you'll find it. And the other thing I mentioned yesterday that I will repeat, if you do get a chance, a block north of here is the main campus. Beautiful campus this time of year. There's the biggest outdoor sculpture collection in the city, so it's worth a little walk around.
Yeah.
And that's it for housekeeping. Brian, I will pass it on to you.
Okay. Well, we have some fun issues here. Can I have the mic? I'll just do this. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We're excited to see you. My name is Ryan Smolar, and I'm the co-director of Placemaking US, along with Madeline Spencer, who's over there. Hello. And we're a national learning and sharing network of placemaking, and we support communities across the US to transform their public spaces into thriving hubs of social connection, health, prosperity, and joy. And our top priority is frontline communities affected by destructive urban planning and social inequities. We were started about 5 years ago at Chattanooga, Tennessee at Project for Public Spaces International Placemaking Week. There was just another one last week in Baltimore put on by Nate Storring and his team. We are part of Ethan Kent's Placemaking X Global Network. So there's networks all over the country. We have a couple here, Placemaking Canada. Mexico was here yesterday, Ecuador. Placemaking Europe is here. So great to be with you guys. There's probably a few more online. We do lots of different things, including we have a suite of online e-courses around placemaking. We also do these placemaking weekends where we take people to cities across the country and show them the great placemaking and superlative work that's being done across the country, sort of like as we did yesterday, walking around, and as we'll do the rest of this weekend. So not just the lecture hall, but getting out. Hey, Mike, there you are. Testing the bones, talking to some of the best practitioners in the business. Our very next placemaking weekend is in Oaxaca at the end of July, really focusing on how indigenous culture interacts with the built environment and how we can preserve and placekeep with them. We also do national trips and visit cities across the country. So this is a road trip we took in 2021 that was 3 months long, 70 cities. There's a train trip on the right that Ethan and I took with some other practitioners last year, I believe, and that was really amazing to go check out. We also have technical assistance programs. So we help communities with their placemaking, utilizing the power of our network. We have a design process, sort of like a community design center process, to do things like help this Cambodian service provider to build their parklet, outdoor dining patio, and a platform for economic development. We've also helped with projects as big as freeway removals in Seattle, where this woman came to us with an idea, and we ended up working with her to get $2 million to re-envision their freeway as part of the federal Reconnecting Communities grant. Recently, we've been doing more of this type of stuff, these symposiums, where we're really trying to move systems forward collectively, and so we're excited to have you here. We've got another one coming up digitally at the end of this month with Portland Metro about equity and art, and different talks with some of their grantees, as well as national people from our placemaking network. And we're working with City Space Architecture and the Museo Spazio Pubblico, Museo Pubblico, Spazio Pubblico, with John Bela, also to do an International Parklet Symposium in Bologna. You may have heard of their ragu. It's very good. And so we hope you will keep in touch. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to your maestro, Tim.
Okay, so excited to have this conversation. Again, anybody that's sort of back further, we really encourage you. This working?
You turn it on.
Is it on? So we're excited to be having this conversation. Pardon?
The light has to go green on the mic.
Yes. Yeah, okay. So we're excited to have this conversation. I encourage anybody that's further back to come up because we really want it to be a conversation. And this is really about how we sustain places and empower partners and nurture neighborhoods by sustaining the organizations that are focused on place. And so now if we can do the little video thing. So normally, as Ryan said yesterday at these gatherings, we have little clips like this, and you started little clips like this that that make us happy and give us a visceral sense of what it's great to have sort of a lively public space. And by the way, these things, the insurance company for the Times Square Alliance came through and saw this and said, "What are you doing?" And we had to stop, which is part of the system set of things. Go on to the next slide. Or, you know, we might talk about how just a few canoes going down the Bronx River led 20 years later to a complete transformation of...
Oh, I see. It's opening off the slide.
Yeah, back to the slides. Next. Or we can, you know, get excited and have the visceral feeling of understanding that a few people going down the river in a canoe led to this massive transformation of an amazing public asset years later. But today, what we're going to do, next slide, oh, I've got the thing now, is we're going to talk about peas, right? This is me as a kid. I used to throw the peas under the table and hope that no one would notice. But this is the stuff under the hood that really makes it, you know, if you're about implementation, either on the city side or as a practitioner, you know that it's the nuts and bolts of, you know, of getting stuff done where we run into these problems. And often at gatherings like this, we either, you know, crow a little bit and say, these are great things we did, and it sounds almost sort of too easy, or we kvetch about all of the issues and problems that we have. And really our purpose today is really going to be about thinking about solutions. Now, we are all frustrated with things, so if you're frustrated, we're not going to talk about it a lot, but we have a little prop here that you can just sort of smash things. And if you're really frustrated, then we have an even bigger hammer when we're talking about bureaucracy or anything else. So everybody, you know, this is a therapy session as well, so we can get out and do that. So just quickly, what we're talking about here are all of these different categories of what I call place-centered organizations. Most of them are focused on public space or start with public space. Some of them, like CDCs, may not have space in their DNA, but if they're doing the kind of work we're doing, they are working across sectors on transforming places, beginning with places. So this is the broad category, and in New York, for instance, from Open Plans, the group we heard yesterday with Jackson, part of what's interesting is that both locally and nationally and internationally, people are starting to connect the dots among these entities. We're gonna do a little Menti poll a little bit, but I took a shot at what are the categories of frustrations that we face, ranging from specific things like bureaucratic things to really the bigger picture thing, which is there isn't a coherent philosophy in most cities about how to partner with these place-based organizations. And again, we'll get your sense of whether we got this right. A lot of the purpose of this is kind of almost like a focus group to see what are the things that we're trying to do. So when we're thinking about solutions, it's about how do we set up the systems and structures to sustain community involvement. How do we set up the systems and structures so that there are nuanced actions by government and partners that reflect what people know about their specific places and the integration of all these efforts across the silos of city agencies, but across philanthropy, across these different entities. Because if we get to the point where we're thinking strategically about the regulatory, legal, and financial structures that support these relationships, these complex hybrid relationships, then we're supporting healthy neighborhoods and a healthy planet. And there's a lot of stuff percolating here. Folks from George Washington, Georgetown, from Brookings, from many different institutions, a lot of folks in philanthropy talking more and more about place. So I think we're on the cusp of a lot of things coming together in a way that are very good for the movement. Fundamentally, when we're thinking about and suggesting solutions, it's about freedom, more support, and more money, and especially looking at some things that are variations of a bid model for how you understand that if we improve a place, there's going to be economic activity, and we can capture some of that to sustain the entities that are doing that work, and also to have a counterpoint and protection from the dangers and the fears of displacement or loss of authenticity as a place becomes more economically vibrant. A lot of these ideas are in much greater detail on a paper that was actually commissioned indirectly by Blaze, who worked at the city's small business agency. And the ideas in this, there's a lot more details, we can share it with you guys afterwards. This was specific to helping small bids in New York City, but there's principles and themes which are basically reflected in these slides that we're gonna be sort of getting out in the course of the summer that are more generally applied to the movement overall. And really, what we want to have the core focus is, is this right in terms of what the problems are and what some potential directions for solutions are? What are the funding tools? Reducing these bureaucratic and regulatory pain points, helping cities' capacity to support organizations, testing how we make the delivery of services better at a local level, because that's what so many of these place-centered organizations do. They have soft power, but they're just connecting the dots among the different silos. The thicket and complex issue of so many things that make our lives difficult, the reason there's all these crazy permitting things are because there's the public space regulations. Really, like in streets, they're still designed for cars, not for managing a public space. There's a lot of catch up to do there. And then how do we talk about what we do in a way that crosses all of our different categories of organizations so that there's a narrative that's coherent when we're talking to elected officials, trying to get them to have a philosophy of support for these entities. And then as we do that, if we're doing kind of what is happening a little bit in New York, but is really, Nate can talk a little bit about this, I think, as well, it's sort of across these different categories of hyper-local organizations, we're building a constituency that can support the sustainability of these organizations and these places. Okay? So now we're going to do kind of rapid fire. Please really try and keep to 3 minutes. Some provocations and thoughts from people who've been working on and thinking about this stuff. So I'm just going to go down a kind of random list, or a list of, in random order.
Trey first, please.
Pardon?
Trey first.
Okay, Trey? Great, yeah, what's over here?
Trey, and you can stand if you want, or you sit there.
I'll sit. I didn't know I was going to kick us off. Cool. Great. So I'm Trey Jenkins. I'm the executive director of the 161st Street Business Improvement District. This is in the Bronx, New York. We have a very famous neighbor right outside of our district called the New York Yankees. You can see the stadium right there. This is actually a very old pic from like 2009 to 2010, I think. But it kind of shows this is our entire our public space, so Lou Gehrig Plaza. Currently, we are the space is a DOT maintained space, but permitting is through parks, which has become kind of an issue, to say the least. And we're actually just got approved to be an unofficial plaza partner with DOT. So probably this time next year, we'll be able to do a lot more as a bid in the plaza. So I have like quick things right here. The work we do this work with placemaking. I try to bring new experiences, new events, new placemaking activities to this plaza, because you don't get those in the outer boroughs. You don't get those in the Bronx. You get them in parts of Manhattan. You get them in North Brooklyn, West Queens, but not. but not the Bronx. So since I started as ED there in 2022, I've been trying to just bring like really cool and new things that the neighborhood hasn't experienced before. Regarding support, we need support from the city, support from elected officials, which I do have, and businesses as well. We have a lot of, we've had some fiscal challenges this year. We haven't gotten paid out grants from the city, and it's been a challenge to try to do some of the stuff that we want to do moving forward.
How much they owe you, Trey?
What's that?
How much they owe you?
They owe us, I keep changing the number, but $300,000 is what I'm owed. So I actually got some money today, so that's good. So while we're doing this, kind of explain that, support, we need that, fiscal and city challenges, we need money, we need to get rid of the red tape. I'm dealing with here's a thing we did last year, the Big Apple. This was in the plaza. Everybody loved it, elected officials, small businesses, people get married at Borough Hall across the street. So then they did photos there, trying to bring that back. I'm dealing with parks right now, saying that you can't do the same activation twice in the same area. So I'm dealing with permitting things today that I should get an okay about that today, hopefully. But it's been a very stressful week to try to bring this back to the plaza. So just things like that just kind of stifles what we're trying to do for our neighborhoods. And just quickly, we did a hip hop boombox last year to celebrate 50 years of hip hop. You had a little crank there, played music, and you had the Apple in the background also there. For all of these, we work with Le Mans Studio. They're a Canadian-based studio, and they also have an office in Texas. They've been great to work with. They do stuff all throughout the world. And then this year, for opening day, we did a baseball bat that was a bench to celebrate the Yankees and Ehrlich Garrick Plaza, who's a Yankee legend. So I want to bring this back. I want this to be permanent because it makes sense to be there. And in the future, Paolo PV reached out to us about bringing this Statue of Liberty structure that was in the High Line to the plaza for next year. And so I'm in conversations with her team and to try to bring this to the district. The person that's in the right corner over there, Marco Severa, he was involved in the DREAM Act, and he's from the South Bronx. They want to feature him on the Statue of Liberty project that we may bring here next year. So very excited about that. Hopefully it can happen. And below there is the Flatiron District. That's a goal of mine to try to turn our plaza into something like that, or something you'll see in like downtown Brooklyn or Flatiron. Obviously, it's a different type of space, but that's the goal that I want to make the Lou Gehrig Plaza be in the future. And there's my information. You can find us on our Instagram, which is it's a great Instagram. Then there's our website as well.
Thank you, Trey.
Sorry.
So we heard about the two different agencies permitting the same space. We heard about money coming late, other permitting issues in terms of the same organization having to apply for permits. Who's up next?
I'd like to let's pull up Sophie from the Trust for Public Land.
Hi, my name is Sophie Newhouse. I'm with the Trust for Public Land's 10-Minute Walk program. So for folks who may not know, the Trust for Public Land is a national nonprofit focused on connecting everyone to the outdoors. We do a lot of research to figure out how to do that, and something I wanted to share some background is that 1 in 3 people in the United States, 100 million children, or 100 million people, including 28 million children rather, don't have access to a park within a 10-minute walk of home. And that's just looking at physical presence, not looking at quality, not looking at programming. And we know that those inequities are exacerbated in communities of color and low-income communities. So given the kind of scale of that challenge, the 10-minute walk team, bless you, is really focused on addressing the high impact, frequently asked questions in this field, and looking to local policy and leveraging local policy to build scalable solutions that we can implement across the country to help reduce this 100 million person gap. So some of the things that I think really resonated from this agenda and from what I've spoken to with a lot of folks in this room about already is really the emphasis on local policy. We've talked about that sometimes local policy is not always super sexy and not the thing that people really want to dive into, but means a lot and makes some huge differences in people's daily lives. Here's that stat again. Also really thinking about working across sectors. So much of that I think is reflected in what folks are talking about, both working between agencies, but also really working with communities, with nonprofit organizations, with businesses, with different kinds of government entities, and also thinking really creatively about partnerships. So looking at activating what we call non-traditional land, so things like schoolyards. The New York City Playgrounds program is a really great example of that, but also looking to other spaces like libraries, like public housing sites, like utilities, in order to kind of bring together folks to increase access to public land. And then I think there's really a real emphasis on the multiple audiences that need to hear about this work and that need to be engaged in this work. So everything that we do is really rooted in community and co-creating with community and letting community priorities drive the process. But also really thinking about, what other stakeholders need to be involved, how can we create capacity within each of those scales, and then also create capacity for folks to collaborate across those scales, both within their communities and with communities across the country. So don't have any kind of silver bullet answers, but I'm really excited to learn from the practitioners who are here and from all of you about what we can do to move this work forward.
And Sophie, can you just mention how having your 10-minute framework is really salient for public officials to bite into this and then make policy change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that is really important that the 10-minute walk program has helped advance are these clear and communicable tools that help local decision makers and communities kind of understand the importance of this work. And so we have the 10-minute walk metric that, again, only measures access right now, but we're really looking to expand that to other measures of quality and impact of parks. But 98 out of the 100 largest cities in the United States use that metric in some form of park planning. And over 300 mayors and elected officials have signed on to a 10-minute walk commitment to really demonstrate their dedication to equity in public space and public space planning. So just having those tools, again, I think is a really powerful way of kind of moving the needle on some of this policy and systems change work that we're talking about.
Great. We're going to hand it over to Tiara Mack, who's the executive director of the Pitkin Avenue bid.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tiara Mack. I'm the executive director of the Pitkin Avenue Business Improvement District. We are in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and our district is very large. It's 30 block faces, 16 blocks, 169 businesses, and we have one official public space. But the way that I view economic development and public community development is holistic and communal, so everything is public space. Whether it's sanitation, our sanitation team cleaned this up, or dog waste stations. We also host markets at our public space Zion Triangle. We had a community bike ride, and the important part about that is we also implemented riding through the actual storefronts. Sorry, I'm going fast. And we also had an Easter parade and an Easter egg hunt at Betsy Field, which is a big park in Brownsville that was recently redone within the last 10 years. And some days we just have to spread love in our community, so our council member encouraged us to do some activations. So we did one in front of a vacant storefront, and you could see us here giving out flowers. And then it launched into a full-on flower making workshop the day before Mother's Day in Zion Triangle. So our issues in Brownsville are very specific, and it's like lack of retail diversity, but the rents are very high. Our bid has been in Brownsville since 1993, and I think property owners really use that as like, we're in a bid, we should charge whatever. But it's like, you haven't done anything to this building in 50 years, and the businesses that the community want to see are not the businesses that can afford $7,500 rent. And it's really the businesses we want: bakery, flower shop, a massage studio, stuff like that. And it's really hard for businesses to take a location risk because they don't have the funding and the backing. So we want to use our public space more to incubate those businesses. That's why we have the markets at Zion Triangle. That is why we also had a storefront for Brownsville. We also had a haunted house and a vacant storefront that the bid actually rented from a property owner. and hosted it there and paid kids from the community to work that out. So it was like really like a circular economy initiative, right? We activated a vacant storefront. We paid youth from the community to be the scares. It was operated for 30 days. And we did charge as like a fundraising just to try and make the money back. My major call to action in this to the city is to really co-create some type of document so that we actually know how to do concessions at Plaza. There is no straight path. And our plaza is a Parks Plaza and not a DOT plaza. So I have a whole nother set of rules that SBS is not even used to dealing with. And then my next issue is that it's really hard to govern a bid and a public space when you don't have an active and engaged board. And the problem is that the people that have been sitting on the board for a very long time are all the property owners that have been in the community for a long time. They don't want to be any board anymore, but no one has really sold their property either. So it's like I have all these property owners that don't want to be engaged, and it's a call to really have business owners sit on the board and have residents sit on the board. But the way that the board law is set up, the bid law is set up, is impossible. So my main thing, I'm ready for bid legislation to change a little bit. It hasn't changed in 40 years. It's older than me, and it's time for it to change. Thank you, everyone.
Great themes, governance and representation, and then to the prior point is how to have some value capture where commercial activity can happen in a public space that benefits a small nascent, whether it's a vendor or a small business person, brings life to a public space, and also generates revenue to the entity that's managing the public space more broadly. Ryan? Okay.
Which is great, because I have direct comments back to this. Hi, everybody. My name is Alana Ehrenberg. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Design Trust for Public Space. We're an almost 30-year-old nonprofit that seeks to unlock the potential of New York City's public spaces for a more equitable city. So this was a project we actually did with SBS about 2 years ago. It was called Neighborhood Commons, Plaza Sidewalks and Beyond. And we did a deep dive into a lot of the things that you've already heard from Trey, from Tiara, about what bids and what other small business organizations are facing with their public spaces. So especially, I should mention that this project started during COVID, which was a huge moment of change for the city because there was a lot of restrictions that were lifted. And it was great. And there were programs that emerged that were spontaneous and flexible in a way that the city had not seen previously. So this was an opportunity for us to really explore how these programs that were currently in place could maybe replace some of the old programs that were there. So we were looking at exploring alternative models for public space management, examining potential new funding mechanisms, and refining an existing alternative governance models. I had a team of fellows. They did a great research framework here where we did the whole user experience model. So we interviewed dozens of public space managers, and then we also walked through the process ourselves with user scenario generation, where we were like, okay, this business owner wants to extend their storefront visibility, or you own a restaurant and you want to put a couple of tables out on the sidewalk. What are the requirements here for this? And usually it was a very, very complicated process that involved 5 to 7 different city agencies. So this is an example of an annual event, commercial quarter, and want to do foods and have activations and programming. So you can see here there are 5 different city agencies that you'd have to go to get permits for this activation. I think one thing I'll point out is that the general public does not differentiate from our public spaces the same way our city does. So our regulatory processes are set up in a way that just makes it impossible for anyone to understand where they have to go or who they have to talk to, who holds the start button for all of these programming and activations. This is another example that I think Trey brought up, and actually Tiara, you did too. You want to have retail in plazas. These are all the requirements that you need to get to, and it's really complicated, especially with organizations like yours, where you have 1 or 2 staff members. You're not a very large organization. The capacity it takes to apply for these programs and permits and funding is so immense that it is overwhelming at times. This is another example of you want to have a performance or a cultural event in your public space. I will also say that I'll get to some of the recommendations that I have for changing some of this, but we basically found that there are really complicated city processes, limited financial resources, no how-to guides that were really clear, and then there was limited communication and collaboration with the city. And so one of the things that came up for us was we really would love to see a one-stop shop or portal for permitting. Permitting across city agencies right now, DOT uses one method, SAPO, DCWP, NYC Media and Attorney uses another, NYC Parks has a different format. So having one portal, you can put all your information at once, and then it goes to all the relevant city agencies to have your permit be approved. Another was self-certification. During the pandemic, they had outdoor dining, and they lifted the requirement that was needed, where it was previously a 9-month process to get a sidewalk cafe outside of your restaurant. When we had outdoor dining as an emergency program, it happened within minutes. So this is another example of if a partner is already qualified and already has a relationship with the city, they should not have to go through all the hoops that they need to get these certain permits. There's another example, we could have some crowd granting, crowdfunding resources for areas that maybe don't need to apply for grants, but can just have their funding matched by the city. And then we also found, Trey, when you were in Jamaica, we worked on this idea of having coalitions of partners apply to manage spaces because, one organization might not be able to do everything at once. And then lastly, I'll just say pay scales or sliding scale fees. Right now there's sliding scale fees for the size of the event, but not for the size of the organization. So having some sort of insurance waiver or reduced permitting fees for organizations that are smaller and cannot maintain some of the levels of insurance that are needed for some of these activations. Thank you, and you can check out the report by scanning the QR code.
That was great. A lot of very specific solutions. And also keep in mind that a lot of these organizations already have 100-page contracts with the city where the city could just add a rider saying, hey, look, you get to do all these things without having to go through treating you like you just walked in the door and nobody knows you.
Madeline.
Okay, so both Ryan and I ran a bid for 8 years, and Krista from Better Block did a beautiful job of, actually, Ryan, would you mind doing the slides? Because I
start
can't.
with this because then I gotta switch.
But I wanted to say that Krista did a beautiful job of creating this graphic, and I realized maybe graphics are the answer because the city, when they saw this graphic, were so ashamed, and they actually were like, please don't show this graphic. But I'm like, we need it for all cities. We want to get these. So, and one of the things about that graphic is at the very end, you see, right when you think it's going to be approved and you've told all the community that are going to do the event.
Hold the mic to your voice.
Then there's something that says, sorry, it was suspended. And that has happened a million times.
Do not collect $200.
Okay, but one of the best solutions that I have seen, and it was great because we had Sheila Foster before she actually wrote this book with Christian Ioni, but I was reading the book, and iteratively, as I went through the book, I didn't see anything new, but she was building up to this thing, and then I got to it, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And one of the things that she has shown is that she uses Eleanor Ostrom, who is a political scientist, Nobel Prize winner, and she talks about the end game here is that there's this nested polycentric system operating at different scales under a larger system of governance. And it's all based on the commons. She's a lawyer at Georgetown University, and she teaches about the commons. And the commons here is a cultural, natural resource that's accessible to all members of society, including the natural materials such as air, water, habitable earth. And these resources, whether they're held publicly or privately, are all a part of what is the commons for everyone. So anyway, okay, going through her thing really quickly. Ryan, would you mind?
It'll just take a second to load back up. Sorry. You can keep talking.
Okay, well, she has a series of beautiful graphics which just show exactly how this ends up breaking down. Okay, so this is the overview of the whole, but go forward, right?
You have a mic.
So these are the co-design principles that she recognizes is collective governance, enabling state, pooling economies, experimentalism, and tech justice. Go forward. Okay, so Collective governance. This dimension refers to the presence of multi-stakeholder scheme where community is organized or not, emerges and partners with public institutions and the private sector in management of the urban commons.
You have a remote, Miss Spencer.
I know, but
okay.
I'm holding too many things. Okay, so enabling state. It expresses the role of the state supporting and making the collective urban management possible. And this is really where the state gets out of the way and allows us the freedom at that base level, like when we're permitting process, so that we can actually enact things. The pooling economy, it reveals the presence of autonomous institutions managed or owned by local communities operating with non-mainstream economic systems such as collaborative, cooperative, circular economies, and for the creation of new opportunities and services. And things like neighborhood association, I just want to mention all the different parts of society. Like, we need that freedom to actually be able to move and get things done. So pooling economies, it reveals the presence of autonomous institutions. Experimentalism. This principle links to the presence of site-specific and iterative bottom-up approach to design legal and policy innovations for co-governance of the local urban commons. So those updates that are needed, and tech justice. And this is something I saw with the homeless so much, and one of the very first things that they wanted was a place to just plug in their phone. And like open access to technological and digital urban infrastructure and data is an enabling driver of cooperation and co-creation of urban commons. Okay, so then we know in cities there's a social innovator, businesses, civil society, schools and institutions, and public authorities. So those are all the different actors. And then this is the co-city cycle, which is when you talk about what it is, you map it, you practice it, you prototype it, test it, and then you model the behavior. So, and then it shows this movement from shared, collaborative to polycentric, nested systems, and I just think she does a beautiful job. And there's case studies where she shows it actually working across many different cities and places.
Beautiful.
So many of those concepts really resonate is what we all have been doing, but haven't had those sort of concepts or labels attached. Who's up next?
Let's do Nate here. Speaking of books.
All right, thank you. Let's see if I can figure out which way this goes. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. My name's Nate Storring. I am a co-executive director at Project for Public Spaces. If you're not familiar with us, we're a national nonprofit organization focused on creating a world of community-powered public spaces. So we do that on the ground, working with communities directly around North America. We also do it through our conferences, our trainings, and our website, which obviously can reach much broader than that. So today I'm going to very briefly talk about a book that I've worked on, gosh, I guess it's been a couple years now, with Jennifer Vey and Tracy Lowe at the Brookings Institution. That's kind of all about this stuff. It's called Hyperlocal, Place Governance in a Fragmented World. And it's a collection of essays about the wide variety, the alphabet soup of organizations that's sort of responsible for managing the public realm. So we actually, I love that you had Sheila Foster up there. She was one of our fantastic chapter authors, and she gives sort of a great overview of the wide range of organizations we have across public, private, nonprofit, and community, and knowledge organizations, you know, all the different possible partnerships and permutations you can have to manage a district or manage public space. Other topics you'll find in this book are really just the history of these organizations. I think one of the big findings is we often hear like, oh, well, government abdicated its responsibility in the 1980s and now we have all these nonprofit organizations. No, this has been going on since the beginning of the United States with various different types of public-private arrangements. And so we, you know, really like that moment in the 20th century, that was kind of the exception in American history in terms of public-private partnerships, of the public sector taking on a lot more responsibility. So we actually have like a whole history to look at for inspiration about how this stuff can work. We also look at, of course, some promising examples, right, around issues like homelessness, international examples, and so on, as well as some of the really, the stuff we don't like to talk about, that maybe isn't going so well right now, right? So just a few takeaways from this. I think someone already said this, but it's really helpful to look at all of these different organizations as kind of one thing, right? And maybe it was right in the introduction there, Tim, but just the idea that business improvement districts for a long time have really focused on talking to each other, and they can talk to parks conservancies and CDCs and URAs and all the different things. And it's really helpful to look at it that way because they have different powers, different business models, different constituencies, and we can all be learning from each other. I think that's particularly true if you're an academic or you're in government, right? For the public sector to think about these things as these related organizations that are all responsible for managing our districts and our parks and other public spaces. If we did it that way, then I think, for example, our metrics would be a lot better of what success looks like. The other thing that I'll point out is the history of this is a history of double-edged swords, right? Our book was very focused on urban inequality and trying to understand the role of these organizations in urban inequality. Are they basically are they good or are they bad? And of course, it's not that simple, right? But essentially, the devil's in the details. I mean, the biggest gap, this is the point number 3, is really the places that do have these organizations and the places that don't have these organizations. That's probably the biggest driver of inequality. But even in the places that do have them, there are also times where things aren't going so great. I mean, again, excuse me, ma'am, from Pitkins Ave, you were talking about the governance structure, right? And the fact that the enabling legislation says it must be 51% commercial property owners. That creates a certain kind of structure, certain kind of biases, and it would be great to break beyond that and think about how can we invite more stakeholders in. But there's lots of other types of organizations with their own governance structures that are worth taking a look at, and the equity component of that. All right, 2 more quick things. Gradual money. The main sort of driver of the spread of certain models in what we found is whether or not you have a consistent source of operating revenue. So, bids, they obviously have that built into their enabling legislation. They have money coming in from property owners. TIFs, right? A lot of people will be familiar with that. The one type of organization we haven't talked about at all yet, HOAs, homeowners associations, they're the biggest, they account for the most place-centered organizations in this country. There are 350,000 of them in this country. And personally speaking, I would argue perhaps they are not the most equitably structured organizations.
That's why I leave off the list, because I think they're not the same public purpose.
Right, but what I would say is, you sort of gave us these 3 questions to respond to. Something that's missing, I think, from this list is what are the drivers that give us the vibrant and equitable neighborhood outcomes? A lot of the things on this list I think are really important about sort of empowering these local organizations, but how do we ensure that they are also driving equity and vibrancy forward? And then the last thing is just a shift in mindset, I think, especially in the public sector, of, it's been all about outsourcing, of saying we won't do that, this other organization will do that. And instead, I think they need to think of themselves as the tenders of an ecosystem, right? All the people in this room were part of this ecosystem. And the public sector can play the role of really supporting that ecosystem, making sure it's healthy, understanding the connections, and really measuring it like we measure an ecosystem. And I'll stop there.
Woo! Blaze has to go in a couple minutes.
I'm going to skip the line on the presentation, sorry. My 3-year-old has a graduation in Fort Greene Park, so I have to run over there and I'll be back. Yeah, who knew? Who knew that was a thing? Blaze Backer. I'm currently run my own consulting practice, but I formed and ran the Myrtle Avenue bid north of here for 10 years, and then more recently was Deputy Commissioner for Neighborhood Development at SBS, our Department of Small Business Services. So we, oversaw the bid program, oversaw neighborhood planning for commercial districts, and did a lot of grant making in low to moderate income communities. And so, I think Tim, so a couple of things, I don't know, there's so many thoughts I have based on what everyone's already presented, but without going through them one by one, I just wanted to, I know I'm one of several ex-government folks in the room, but I think, there were certainly a lot of attempts at moving the needle. Certainly, I was mostly in the de Blasio administration, a little bit of the Adams administration on, just as some examples on sort of, again, just in the commercial district portfolio, we were trying very hard to get into more communities like Trey's and Tierra's. We only had $1.5 million in grant making of federal money for partners like theirs when I started. Like there was no city money that went to that kind of work, and we did get that up to $10 million a year by the end. We got to move, we were able to move from like 1-year grant commitments to 3-year grant commitments, and we emphasized hiring actually personnel. When we came in, everyone was like, don't spend money on staff, spend it on OTPS, and I was like, well, the people who do the work are the staff, so we actually kind of insisted on them hiring full-time people to do this work. So all that being said, as you heard, like the contracting process, getting money out the door, after 8 years of kind of struggling with trying to move the needle on some of those things, like we just, it was a slog. And even when we got baby steps of, allowing 20% upfront payments or milestone-based payments instead of reimbursement-based payments, I've already heard there's been some retrenchment back to old practices. So, all that being said, some of the things that we attempted to do, or I guess started before I left, and that is part of what Yating, if you saw the presentation yesterday, sort of laid out some of the new New York recommendations. And one of them, the initiative number 13, was around creating a new citywide public-private partnership that was leveraged to help, all partners, really, place-based partners, particularly, I think, the report speaks to commercial district partners. I think many of us thought of it as broader than just commercial district partners, but, helping the 1 to 2 member staff organizations, and really looking at, equitable resources, whether that's funding or, expertise, talent, whatever it might be. Looking at, Tim's talked about some of the, value capture mechanisms, but even just centralized tools around sponsorship and revenue collection and concessions and things like that. And then the other things in a lot of the listening I've done over the last year since leaving government has really been around other just shared service models to support, whether it's back office or programmatic support that could help the smallest organizations. And then, I was happy to see you see sort of the data and technology equity. I think that piece comes up constantly. I mean, the number of bids that are all like working to create the exact same tool would drive me absolutely crazy, and I attempted several times to kind of get them in a room. But even government isn't allowed to pick kind of favorites in the private sector, so we were often not allowed to recommend any technology solution. So anyways, all that being said, I would love, Mia's here going to take some notes for me while I'm out of the room, but ideas, I know, I talked, there's like there's so many organizations doing such amazing work, like the Horticultural Trust for Public Land and Design Trust and all the people working in New York City, and I think my thought was like, how do we either, I don't know if it's a new entity, if it's a collaboration of existing entities, but somehow just getting people working together so we're not duplicating effort, but literally getting to a place where we're, working towards the same end goal. So I would welcome so many thoughts and ideas that folks might have in the room.
Thanks, Blaze. And I think next up is one of the most successful intermediary sort of organizational case studies. So with Liza and Sara.
Yeah, and one often finds it's in the realm of parks where there's a lot of times there's citywide organizations, like in New York, there's the City Parks Foundation, Partnerships for Parks, that specifically focus on how to support a lot of the smaller groups. There's another example we're about to hear from.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liza, and I'm Chief Operating Officer of the Hort, and this is Sara, our executive director. Hello? And so we're here today to talk about the contribution to public space that plants bring. So I know there are a lot of ways to get our frustration out here. We like to think about getting our frustration out through connecting with nature and bringing plants to people. And I'll talk about that for a little bit. So at the Hort, we've been around since 1902. We started in a very different city. We started as a sort of, horticultural society for people who already had access to plants and flowers so they could appreciate them and help others appreciate them. We are not that organization anymore. Almost 125 years later, we are really thrilled to be able to work in public spaces and also like schools and supportive housing facilities throughout the city to be able to bring plants to people and to really make sure that that connection can not only be introduced, but sustained and valued. So here today, we're here to talk about public space and the role that we play in what we call greeting the in-between and how we do that community by community. So yesterday, and in the Chief Public Realm Officer's report, she talked a lot about 3 elements of public space management. Hardware, so how is it set up? Software, how does it feel? And then orgware, how does it function and how is it coordinated? And we feel very lucky and happy and just inspired to be able to sit at the epicenter of this work in our city. Back in 2008, over 15 years ago, the Hort first partnered with the Department of Transportation to participate in greening the cityscape and the in-between. This was talked about a lot yesterday, so I'm not really gonna go through it now, but Plan NYC was really the start of this under the Bloomberg administration, where, it was, let's create plazas. Let's create them throughout the city. Yes, 10-minute walk to a park, and it's so important, but also 10-minute walk to any public space that people can use to just enjoy themselves and be. And the Hort was really excited to be in the conversation, to be able to say, and you know what, we can put plants there too. It doesn't just have to be furniture, and it can be plants, and we can use this as a way to infuse nature into the cityscape. And that really set the tone for what we've been able to do over the past 15 years. It started as a private philanthropy project, essentially, and has become a significant public investment, as we've discussed today. So how do we partner with communities? There's three, along the lines of what Yating outlined in her report yesterday, there's three real specific areas. We green the in-between. We help set up and keep clean public space, public plazas, and open streets. And then also we provide Hort support and public programs. And so we like to think of our connection to communities and, mostly communities that do not have a bid, though we do work with communities, of course, that do have bids. We want to put plants everywhere. So if a bid has money and they want to put plants in, we're there. But our real, the special sauce that's been referred to is working with organizations that are not collected in the way of a bid and or resourced in the way of a bid. And so we do this by planting and making sure we can put plants places. I don't have to talk about this right now because many of you will see this on open streets and public plazas on the tours later today, tomorrow, and Sunday. We set it up and keep it clean. This is really important because what we're able to do by having to have this presence, this physical presence, this boots on the ground presence in communities 365 days a year means something really important that hasn't really been discussed thus far, and is workforce development and job creation. Leveraging this funding and our role and our privilege in these communities creates jobs. And we're thrilled to be able to think through that responsibility in a way that embraces training and paid full-time work programs that provide the hard and soft skills for people to be able to attach to employment in the communities that they serve, and then also move up through either a ladder with us, with a park conservancy or a public space maintenance organization, or a bid, because this is a brand new sector, this public space maintenance, non-city employees sector. I'll move quickly, I promise. And so we do believe that economic and workforce development is essential, and we do this work through our partnership with minority and women-owned businesses as well. Many organizations sort of bring people in from the suburbs and New Jersey, love the suburbs in New Jersey, but we want these jobs to stay in the city. Very, very quickly though, I'll go quick. Follow us on Instagram for all of this. Public programs, our networks with communities and connecting communities is a really important part of our work. That's the orgware. And we also do great work in supportive housing facilities in schools and a greenhouse education center in Riverbank State Park. Follow us on Instagram. Look at all the beautiful flowers and plants on the tours over the next few days. Thank you.
Just one really interesting thing that was a huge innovation. When DOT set up the Plaza program, they said, we're not just going to sort of encourage these partners, we're actually going to fund them. And so a distinctive thing is that that you guys have always done many things with a mixture of philanthropic and other monies, but the city said, we're going to give you a contract to sort of maintain and take care of these things, which is a real different paradigm for managing public spaces. That, for instance, in the parks world, the city has never given a contract to a partner and said, we'll pay you to do some of this work.
Sorry, I just want to say the RFP process for the operations and maintenance. Give her the microphone. Was really, it very exciting that the city RFP that out to make that investment. Oh, thank you. It was definitely a real declaration. We're incredibly appreciative of our partnership with DOT and the fact that that investment was made and then RFP'd out for public application was really, really exciting. It was just a real milestone in this work.
Ryan, do you have a next? John? John?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, cool. Regarding private-public partnerships, I want to talk about Parking Day in the context of public-private partnerships. As I think many of you know, Parking Day started as a one-day guerrilla art intervention in 2005. Last year, there was about 30,000 people participating in Parking Day around the world. Similarly, in 2009, the city of San Francisco launched the first Parklet program. Parklet is actually a miniature public-private partnership. The city issues a permit, and that Parklet sponsor builds and operates and maintains a Parklet for public use. I don't know if anyone understands that distinction, but Parklets in San Francisco are public space. We get into the pandemic, and sorry, I'm just going to go back here. Into the pandemic, many municipalities globally lower the barrier for participation, for utilizing our curb lane in a new way, and almost overnight, thousands of these outdoor dining sheds are built globally. I just did a little calculation of an estimate. If there were 70 parklets in San Francisco in the first 10 years of the Parklet program, almost overnight there was 2,000 of these commercial outdoor dining sheds. But they really are a different species in terms of the utilization of our curb lane and public realm. So on the one hand, that lowering the barrier resulted in this enormous opportunity for small businesses in San Francisco and globally to actually generate revenue from curb lane, right? San Francisco collected about $23 million in meter revenue in 2023. Small businesses generated $500 million in revenue from operating a commercial outdoor dining structure. So that's a really significant shift in resources towards small businesses. However, if you think about now globally, there's probably 600 to 700,000 of these commercial outdoor dining structures around the world. Is that, an equitable use of our streets? Do we need to think about better balancing, opportunities for small business with providing opportunities for community uses, for third spaces in these streets? And so actually I'm working closely with Simon Bertrand from SF New Deal, and we're hoping in the next few months to launch San Francisco's version of the Dine Out NYC. And there's three kind of overarching principles there. One is lower the barrier for businesses. The second is, can we do a better job of, through collective management and governance, actually to sort of remove the obstacles for businesses and remove the responsibility of individual small businesses to manage a tiny piece of the public realm for public use? Can we do a better job of balancing public and private uses in the public realm? So that's the sort of overarching objectives for what's called the Better Block program in San Francisco. But I want to, one of the reasons I think this is interesting is my 3 minutes already? Okay. So it's an example of a decentralized autonomous organization, right? Parking Day, the Parklets, just like Placemaking X, you talked about yesterday, Ethan, like this underarching organization. It's a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. What role can DAOs play working with bids, working with public space management entities to lower the barrier, provide the minimum sort of strategic frame that allows community to really come in and fill the gap regarding public life participation, vibrant life in spaces. I wanted to just mention that Ryan mentioned this. There's an international Parklet symposium in Bologna this fall where we're trying to craft a Parklet manifesto for the EU. Should they be commercial spaces? Should they be public? Somewhere in between. There's also a call for a journal. So for the academic folks out there or people who are doing writing on Parklets, temporary uses, and co-creation, Luisa Bravo from the Museo Spazio Pubblico is launching all this. Ryan asked me to talk about the example of how do we hold the automobile industry and motordom accountable for the impact on our world. There's a great precedent from the Master Settlement Agreement in 1989 with the tobacco industry, where we held an industry accountable. They came up with $200 billion, right, from many states. The estimated global impact of negative externalities of the automotive industry are $2.3 trillion a year. Imagine if we began to hold that industry accountable for a fraction of that impact and generate a revenue source for placemaking, activation, healthy streets in our communities.
Okay, we have one more wonderful speaker who is Martha Snow from the Urban Design Forum.
Awesome. Hey folks, sorry for being a little bit late.
And Tim, she wasn't in the room, so you want to orient her to your system of, cracking the whip?
3 minutes. 3 minutes. Awesome. All right, we'll be extremely quick. All right, it looks like the formatting of my slides is all funny, so we will go with it. Okay. Wow, okay, great. Well, we are rolling with it. Happy to talk about these as it's useful. So my name is Martha Snow. I'm the Director of Community Design at the Urban Design Forum. We are a membership organization that inspires New Yorkers to design, build, and care for a better city. So we're a member-powered organization. And I want to share just a little bit about our local center initiative in partnership with the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development. They are a membership organization of over 80 community groups in New York City. And together we are running the local center. It is a community design initiative to equip local leaders with the technical assistance, funding, and connections to reclaim, re-envision, and activate public spaces in their neighborhoods. This is really founded on a belief that New Yorkers should all have the power and resources to shape their own futures. And I'm sure we've been hearing from folks across the board just about the kind of inequities in New York in resource distribution for public spaces. So our initiative is really focused specifically on supporting low-income and BIPOC neighborhoods in getting the technical assistance, funding, and connections to really be driving their own visions for their public spaces. So far we've supported, I'm sorry, this should be purple, there should be something totally different here, but we're just gonna go with it as it's useful. Just a little bit of context, this program came out of an initiative called Neighborhoods Now that we launched as part of during the pandemic, really seeing the need for folks to be getting support, especially in neighborhoods hardest hit by the pandemic. We assembled basically technical assistance teams of designers, planners, architects, et cetera, to really be supporting neighborhood-based organizations across the city. It started as a 6-week sprint and turned into really this kind of 3-year effort where public space vision plans, night markets, a really amazing kind of range of projects came forth. So just want to talk a little bit about, and again, apologies, this is not what this should look like. But a sense of kind of how we work with the local center now is that we're supporting neighborhood-based organizations at the local level, and we're also thinking about the field and the city. Apologies. So, and I know I've got a short period of time, but just quickly want to say, at the local level, we connect neighborhood-based organizations to technical assistance, teams of planners, designers, and engineers to realize their projects in public space. We're offering holistic funding to build neighborhood partners' capacity in their staff capacity, funding technical assistance teams, and implementing pilot projects. We're also supporting them, and a few of our team members, including Sara and Trey, who are in this program with us. We support them in creating temporary activations to demonstrate their visions through hands-on facilitation, connections to city agencies, and additional connections across our network. 30 more seconds. I'm gonna skip through most of this because these are not useful anyways. All right, great. These are, I'll just speak because I think these pieces are not useful. I think the last pieces I would just mention about these projects is that we're also thinking at the field level. So we're thinking about how to be really telling the story of these projects, how to be creating a cohort and an ecosystem of folks that are thinking about this work. And then we're also thinking at the city level, so convening public sector stakeholders, neighborhood partners to really think about the systemic challenges beyond just what we're seeing at the local level, and that we're evaluating impact there. And I think those are the last pieces. Happy to talk about it more. I think the last things I just wanted to share with this group are that, you know, we're really trying to solve some of these big challenges in terms of resourcing local visioning, easing bureaucracy burdens, and creating pathways for sustainable stewardship. We also seeing the role of a trusted intermediary between grassroots and top-down approaches. That's really an essential element here, and that's the role we're trying to fill. And that it's also really important to be building an ecosystem of dedicated local leaders, designers, and public servants. And that's part of what we're trying to do and what we're excited to be hearing from folks here. So apologies about the slides, but excited to be part of the conversation.
Thank you.
First of all, let's have a round of applause for everybody who's spoken and who has put up with my aggressive time management techniques. So what I'd like to do now is offer opportunities for other people who have not had a chance to speak, just to reflect in any way on any of the things we've talked about the frustrations and the limitations, and about also the possible solutions and what we may have left out. We will do the instant survey in a minute, but I just wanted to see if there's other voices, other people who want to reflect on what we've talked about before we take a shot at getting a sense of the room. And this is really just a snapshot. This is like a focus group of a lot of people who have been thinking about and working on these things. It's not definitive, but it can guide some of our future work. Yeah, sure.
I heard her saying, and I just am not sure that I understand. There's 80 you guys manage neighborhood associations or?
Madeline, they put on the event last night, Urban Design Forum, that you watched.
I know, but like for a place like Santa Ana that doesn't have any kind of organization of their neighborhoods, I'm trying to understand that, is that what is going on?
They do a technical assistance program similar to United Streets.
Yeah, so we work with CDCs, we work with small bids, we work with neighborhood-based organizations. There's a range. Some are cultural organizations, some are CDCs, and we're supporting them with technical assistance, funding, and training. Exactly, yeah. Yep.
And I think there's an existing entity, the Association of Neighborhood and Housing.
ANHD, yep.
Yeah,
so
that's been existing for a long time. It's had relationships with a bunch of different neighborhood organizations.
Exactly.
And you've partnered with them on this.
Just to connect it to some of the stuff we heard, so Trey and oh my God, I'm blanking on your name right now. Tiara are fellows of their program, so they're the ones working with them to improve these processes. And then Alana's report that she showed, where they went through the process of actually trying to get permits and showed how difficult it is, they put out those reports to hope to change agencies, and they actually work very closely with the city, which is another sort of parallel we saw with the Trust for Public Land, and the Hort, where they come in as trusted intermediary partners to help innovate city processes that, as Blaise said, are very, very difficult and sort of entrenched in the cities. And as Nate pointed out, have been going on since the times of de Tocqueville.
I want to add one more thing to the Urban Design Forum piece, is that the Pickett Avenue bid would not exist without grants. Last year, we received $600,000 in grants. We did all of these cool projects, no press releases because I don't have the capacity. Everybody that was in the staff with me were inexperienced because that's all I can afford to pay, right? And I couldn't keep them long. So who's coming to a job for 10 months but somebody that's inexperienced and that's interested in just learning and leaving, right? So with this Urban Design Forum grant, I'm able to also have an attorney, someone help me do press releases, a photographer that comes out. What else? It's just an extreme value add in addition to what the city would have provided. I have colleagues, 10 other bids got the commercial grant, the lighting grant directly through SBS. They don't have this additional value add that I'm having as a bid, my commercial lighting grant coming through ANHG and Urban Design Forum. SBS is still a part of the project, but because their network is so big and diverse and they have done so much good work, I'm also an alumni, so you hear me fangirling over here, but we have done so much good work and they've done so much good work that people are actually interested in seeing that organization and the projects that they work with succeed more than what the city has capacity to do, because this is not the city just being terrible. It's literally a capacity in a capital issue.
And go Go ahead.
I was about to, since I'm doing the urban design thing too, so, and we're in the process of becoming the plaza partner and maintaining the plaza. This grant has allowed us to kind of lay the foundation about what we want to do in the future, what I envision the plaza being. So this has helped us a lot with, like Tiara said, with the lawyers, photos and stuff, things that like I can't do by myself. So it's been great working with the Urban Design Forum. So to lay the foundation for what this bid and this plaza can be 3 to 5 years in the future. And also I want to just kind of add like the thing that frustrates me working in the city is like being able to, as a private citizen, I could go into the plaza and do whatever I want and set something up and not really, I might get in trouble, but who knows. But as an organization or bid, we get our hands slapped every other hour of the day. So it just gets like super frustrating trying to like do something positive for the community, then, you know, but as a private citizen, I could probably do what I want and probably get away with it a little bit. So it gets frustrating dealing with that.
I think with respect to your point about equitable solutions, a few things here. One is that idea of a citywide entity that can provide some of that support for the small groups. Another is the idea of supplemental funds, whether it's philanthropic funds or through a contract or something else, city funds that are supporting those intermediaries that support the smaller groups. So those are some things that are some of the themes that can address some of the equity issues. Some voices we haven't heard before. So do you want to?
Sure. I almost don't know where to begin because y'all are speaking my language in so many different ways. I feel like I intersect with each one of you in a different way. My name's Katie. I'm with the North Brooklyn Parks Alliance. I'm the executive director. It's a 20-plus-year-old parks conservancy. And so it's interesting because yesterday, while y'all were at the Public Realm with Yating, I was at a roundtable for parks conservancies, and we pretty much just talked about DOT the whole time. And so the intersection between parks and, you know, open streets, public plazas is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. With the Urban Design Forum, we're also working together kind of to create like a little bit of like a small bid-like service in the Eastern IBZ of Greenpoint. We're also working to form a business improvement district in Northside Williamsburg, working on the Horticultural Society does a lot of work on our open streets in North Brooklyn, and we're working on identifying a corridor of concessions with the plazas and the open streets that we manage with DOT. And the bureaucracies that you all are talking about, you know, we have our license agreement with the Parks Department, we have a and use and occupancy permit with state DOT to manage a 7-acre park. I have an MOU with DOT for open streets. I have a plaza agreement with DOT for plazas, and it's ridiculous. And I just now, I think we spoke before, I was like, I need a lawyer. I finally got a lawyer, which I'm very excited about. But these are all very hard problems to solve, and and I would say like the sustainability is only possible kind of if you do everything. And that's why I approach the district that we are mandated to serve, which is all of Brooklyn's Community Board 1, all of Greenpoint, all of Williamsburg, almost like a puzzle. So we have a concessions agreement with DOT. We manage basically an open air venue that brings in about $1 million a year by renting it out for large scale events. You know, because I am also due like almost $250,000 from 3 different city agencies for services already rendered. So I feel like a bank almost. I feel like I'm loaning the city money and not getting paid back for it. And you can't, you know, we've been around for more than 20 years through 3 different administrations, and we have flourished or basically been bankrupt, kind of depending on which administration is around and how they view public-private partnerships. The flexibility that you have to raise money on public land or not, and then, or what kind of flexibility you have in the agreements. And I know bids and parks conservancies, I'm saying we need to come together more, right? And so Parks Conservancy should be part of this conversation, bids should be part of the Parks Conservancy conversations, because really they're the same. They're both public-private partnerships creating money. I mean, you guys get an assessment, which is awesome. That's why I was like, I want to bid too. But the point is that like you have to diversify your fundings. You had a list of like the possible alternative funding sources. You need to do all of them because any one of them is precarious in any particular moment in time.
And it is, but you are in, what's interesting here is the idea of a mostly parks group using the business improvement, or public parks and public space group, using the business improvement model of self-levy legislation in a new way that's interesting.
So almost every speaker has really spoken to me because we run 34th Avenue Open Streets, and that's 7 days a week programming. And we've had to jump through all those hoops. And we actually went to the city and we testified, and we also spoke to Yatsi Ling when she took over. It's just to like have a chess game, you have to get, or a Zumba, you have to get all these different permits and you have to get insurance. And if we really did all the things we were supposed to do, we would never be able to do that. And we do that several times a day, and we do it across 26 blocks. So we also went to the city and said, I'm not going to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning for the rest of my life to put barricades out, and we want this to work where I grew up in the Bronx, right, not far from you guys, where you are. And this has to be able to work and be transferable to every single neighborhood in the city. Because we want for example, we want every single neighborhood with a school to have a school street, and we want it to be able to be active. So all of these barriers have to come down, and a lot of times when we apply, we're waiting each time months and months and months, and there's always a reason to get paid from the city, but we're paying that city back. So I have to go to the NYPD and get a $45 sound permit. I have to give money to get a permit to have the open street. I'm waiting for money to give it actually back to them. I mean, it's insane. And then I have to, if you trip on my street at 6:59, it's on the city. But somehow, because I'm a partner and we volunteer for you, I have to get insurance if you trip at 8:02. How does that make any sense? So I testified before City Council, but we really need to fix these kind of insane issues because we want this to work. It really drives and really builds community, and we do not have businesses, right? So we don't have access to bid money. And so we've applied for a gun grant for money here. We've applied for a bike grant for money here. But also we've relied so heavily on volunteers because it's like, how much do you want to spend time indoors applying for money when you could just be outdoors and activating the space? So it's a game that we play back and forth. So many of you who really spoke to me today. Thank you.
We did open streets my first 2 years, and I did it kind of differently, as I did like one open street every 2 weeks for like two months. But it's just me and an operations manager. So DOT was saying that, oh, we want you to do your open streets like weekly, and like I'm not doing that. Like it's just me. Now I have a program manager, but they're like, oh, you can get volunteers, but it's just another added level of things that we have to do. It's super frustrating. So I want them to actually go back to the weekend walks that existed before COVID, because it was easier to do one-off events, and like they won't do that at all. So I hear you.
Couple things. First, I just want to see any voices that we haven't heard yet. I know Sara and Sophie want to make some comments. And also this is a very New York focused conversation, but if there's places where people feel like totally what I'm experiencing in my place, or wait, totally different because I'm in a different culture or perspective or context.
Yeah, so just a quick thing. I'm Daniel Latore. Not only am I making the film here with Brandon, but I also run the Wise City, which is basically all about digital placemaking, after having started that with Ethan and folks at PPS. I think one of the big things that's missing, that's really hitting me in listening here, is looking at what's number 5th. We just lost on congestion pricing, right? And due to one of the most well-worn, predictable, unsurprising arguments about impact on business. So to me, the way I would translate that is what's missing is media strategy. So a media theory, right? So we're dealing with all of this technocratic, super hyper-libertarian media ecosystem that produces a massive amount of disinformation and misinformation. And where are organizations, how are we dealing with that where's the media education and literacy to counter that? Where's the other partnerships that are connected to this around democracy defense that are facing this, where the city is the, people have talked about, the city is the nexus where this battle is happening. It's the grounded, embodied, somatic place where this becomes real. So I keep feeling like it gets ignored often because we're so physical, we're spatial, we're dealing with cities and communities, we're out in the neighborhood, in the field. It all feels so clear and real to us, but then the auto lobby, the insurance lobby, et cetera, they come in and they use the classic argument, and we're defenseless because we have no collective power. We don't have a collective media strategy. So there's like a campaign political media strategy thing that's needed. I don't know where to start such an organization or how to partner that, but that's something that I want to do something about, not just complain about.
That's a great segue to what we're going to get to in a minute. If people haven't now done this, let's get your thoughts on this, just in terms of the relative things here. Because in our list of solutions, one is developing a narrative about what it is we do, and so many of the things that we're talking about, I think, grow out of this. Part of it is a lack of collective power, but also people just not thinking holistically about, wait, we want to empower neighborhoods and communities and frame it in that way, as opposed to like, we want to sort of avoid risk from, the narrowest bureaucratic point of view. I think Sara and then Sophie? And
Sara, Sophie, then Ben over in the corner.
Okay, great.
So I just want to introduce something slightly different. Having been at the forefront of this with DOT for 15 some odd years, I worked for the Parks Department before that for quite some time and ran the Urban Park Rangers that had many other of these similar issues. And so it may sound like I'm the kiss-asser. I will tell you firsthand that DOT, our city, and DOT has done a phenomenal job trying to make this effort as locally reflective of the community as it possibly could be. When this first came into being, there was no funding. This is innovation. In any major city where you suddenly come up with something new, I remember the Department of Education's heartache when computers came into existence. Where in God's name was the Department of Education to get enough money, not only to buy computers, but to replace them every year because computer technology changed? So I just want to lay over a positive thing, which is the explosive growth of this program. And the fact that you are all here and you all have voices is extraordinary. The part of the Hort's experience was, yes, we raised the money. The government helped us to raise the money. The community helped us to raise the money. It was a shared effort. Everybody knew there were problems. There still will continue to be problems, because anytime you try to combine local governance with what is a shared resource in an enormous group of people. So while I sympathize with the idea that McGolrick Park should run itself, that's highly inefficient. And by the way, the Hort raised almost $850,000 to build a pollinator garden in McGolrick Park that is 100% dead. And you can imagine the heartbreak and why it's no individual's problem. It's a bureaucratic issue. So anyway, no more lecturing. I think everybody here bringing the idea of what are the obstacles to the table, but not bashing in particular our government partners, because they are actually on all of your side and dealing with many of the same issues that you are.
Well, and just to point on that really quick, so you're 100% right. That is why we're here. This is a revolution happening in the streets of New York City, and this is the forefront of this global issue. And as Guillermo pointed out, the whole world is actually looking at what happens in New York City. I was just in Australia. They want to know what Mike Lydon's doing. They want to see it. They want to hear about the Hort. Well, what's very surprising is, preparing for this, we interviewed lots of leaders in New York, and they didn't know where the Hort program comes from, although they know how important it is. The way that you guys figured that out and crafted that is not part of the general knowledge of the leading advocates in town, that this was a creative partnership of your organization and Bloomberg Philanthropies to do an experimentation like what Madeline pointed out with Coast Cities, that testing of new ideas, and now is a scale $27 million DOT contract. And so not knowing how something like this that we have today came about is something that needed to get wider knowledge with the advocates working today to innovate those other missing pieces of the puzzle, like this funding piece, which was the other major thing I heard from every single public space management organization in town, is that repayment is not coming fast enough. And that's not just a problem here in New York City, that's ubiquitous across our nation, that there's this missing financial intermediary partner who's going to play that another critical piece of the pillaring of moving this world forward.
So for me, Hort was our solution. They came and they started, now that we used to clean our street, take care of the median, and open and close the streets every single day. And we went to DOT to say, we can't do this for the rest of our life. That's when Hort came in. And Hort not only does what they do, they hired a lot of our volunteers that had been doing that for free, and some of them got their very first jobs ever. So I just want to shout out to you guys. Thank you.
I just want to add one thing to make sure everyone understands. 100% of the work that the Hort does is at the direction of DOT. And it is DOT that said we want equity in our open space, and there are places like Times Square Bid, which can raise a ton of money, and there are places like Pitkin, which can't really raise very much. And in fact, we are in many locations where there aren't even partners at a local level. So the notion that local residents should be deprived of public space because none of them have enough time to form a local partner, that's not just. So just want to make sure you know that we are only in low income areas.
I just want to say something really quickly. I also worked for Parks for 20 years. I ran their workforce development programs. And a lot of what we're describing involving what happens when you start to rely on the city for payment is what people all across our city have experienced for a considerable amount of time. And this is why they can't move the barriers, right? Like people need to work and be independent. And so it all links together from an equity perspective in terms of the way the city supports itself and all of our organizations in some form.
And I think tying into workforce development funds, it can be another source of like a major ongoing funding stream when we connect it to employment needs for people. I also love just the general point about we want to have this session with sort of the allies within government because they would be banging that thing away about like, you don't know what I'm facing within my agencies. And part of our agenda that we also see is how to develop the capacity within government to help and support those allies. And then the other missing party still is the private sector, which is, put hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of like commercial property interests. There are potential downsides to it, but I sort of view it as sort of Robin Hood. You're getting the money from people that are making money from private property and they're investing in public space. And if it's managed by an NGO, that can lead to a lot of good things.
Thanks. I just want to add to what the Hort folks were saying. I think the amazing work that the Hort does all across the city, particularly in underserved communities, is essential work, but it does expose a flaw in the governance model that the city has. And that flaw is that the city will build. We have now over 90 new plazas since the plaza program started. The city will build them. The city will not maintain or operate any of them. So they partner with other community groups. The bids, as we've said, have at least some form of revenue stream. Many of them don't. And the reason that the Hort has to come in and fill that gap is that they are giving these small community groups extremely onerous contracts with all sorts of insurance requirements, a derisory stipend, and they get into financial difficulties. They can't afford the maintenance, and the Hort comes in to fill that gap. Without the Hort, I don't know where we would be. But I think it does expose a weakness in the governance model that the city has.
And the funding model. That's why there's a movement here called Partnerships for New Yorkers for Parks, 1% for Parks. And it's saying if you're from an equity point of view, there has to be government funding for public space and neighborhoods and these kind of management entities they do better when they partner with local groups, but there still has to be more money. And that's where we also start getting to the issue of building coalitions and political support, which is also tied in to the issue of what's the narrative that we're developing that will help us get that support that cuts across all of these different groups and issues. I've forgotten to get to you.
Hi, I just wanted to share a different model, and I had to run out for a second, so forgive me if this was shared. My name is Ben Schull, and I'm currently a director with a Chicago-based design and communications firm called A5. But up until very, very recently, about 2 weeks ago, I was the vice president of a community development organization in Memphis, Tennessee, called the Memphis Medical District Collaborative. And I wanted to share a little bit about how MMDC is organized, because I don't think we've heard about anchor-led organizations, and that is an incredibly powerful way to leverage the private sector to have public benefits, right? So MMDC is partners with 8 different hospitals and colleges in a 2.6 square mile area. And those contributions from the anchors, their participation as members in the organization, allows the organization to work across a variety of dimensions. So placemaking, real estate support, and encouraging development. We issue a number of grants. There's a workforce development team, beautification of the streets. It's a really interesting model to act almost as a parallel CBID, but as a private 501c3. So being able to partner as a neighborhood-based organization with an anchor, or think about where there are other CDCs that are already operating in a similar way, is another creative workaround, and to try and get the private sector directly participating in this conversation.
Yeah, first I want to say with the Hort, I worked with you guys last year, back 161st Street bid, and you guys are amazing working with Nick. Trying to do it this year, but again, lack of funding. So one thing that's another frustrating thing with the city and like lacking of funds is people say it's been like this for 20 years, 30 years. Like, why do we keep just kind of kicking the can down the road? Like, why don't we fix it? I don't know what the answer is, but my pay grade, but like, it's something that needs to be addressed. And it's just the negative part that working with government just keeps continuing always. And one thing that we haven't really talked about, which is kind of outside of this placemaking situation, is a lot of people, at least with SBS and some city agency, a lot of like people, experienced people left that agency, because people aren't being paid basically. And that kind of pretty much delayed contracts. People have to learn how to do, how to get contracts done, how to get funding out. So that kind of hurt a lot of the bids and organizations this year, because there's been a lot of turnover. That, I don't know how you need to address that, but that's something that has hurt. A reason why we aren't having funding, why we're having backwards and forwards with these people, because people they're new. They don't know what they're doing right now. So that's another aspect that kind of nobody wants to talk about, but that's a major problem why we aren't getting our funding on time.
And just bringing it back to our site visit yesterday, every public space we went to either had no drinking fountain or the drinking fountain was installed and broken. Some of the sites were actively being flooded, and all of the green space a lot of the green space was fenced as well. And so we're seeing in community these problems and also lack of ability to put out concessions and start new economy. Like talking with Trey and Sara, you couldn't have better on-site partners, and a lot of governments are wrapping themselves in the words equity, diversity, inclusion, but when you go out to a community and meet the awesome people and they're ready to get to work and do things and they're doing everything right and they're $300,000 in arrear from getting paid back on overcomplicated contracts that they have to spend most of their single employee time working on, we have a problem that's not being addressed, and that's not to pit on New York City. This is ubiquitous across the board because we have really anarchic government systems that are regulating this topic that needs to evolve into the 21st century. Laura, was there?
Yeah, so my name's Laura Phillips Edgecombe. I'm the principal of Downtown Public Spaces in Jacksonville, Florida. Kind of to Tim's statement earlier, I work for a philanthropic agency. I work for one of the largest funds in the Southeast, and then my position's on loan to our local government. We in Jacksonville are just kind of coming. There's a lot of us that have been in this space for a long time, but like from a full city, we're a consolidated government. Our city and county are the same. We're 864 square miles. We have the largest urban park system in the United States. and we spend the least amount of money per person on parks. Our park score is like in the gutter. So during this administration, I led the transition committee on parks for the mayor's office, and like that, everyone's like, that's fantastic, and look at everything you're doing. The concern that we're having is that once this mayor's gone in 2.5 years, then what happens? So like we're all 100 miles to nothing. Our city council, who holds the purse strings, has a special committee on downtown right now. Everyone's like, build it, build it, build it, but no one's thinking about the next steps. And so kind of, I just want to say I'm really excited to be here, but listening to y'all, where I would like to try to wrap my brain around is, yes, we understand the need for collaboration, we understand the partnerships, we understand how to explain this to everyone, but then how do we make sure it's there when the next mayor or the next council person comes in? These buzzwords are a real thing right now. Like, they're not buzzwords to us, they actually mean something. These are practices that we do, but in the greater good. So just, if anyone has any hard, fast, I know there's no perfect answer, but I just, being in the space in between is great. I live in the gray area, I don't live in the sunshine, all the fun things, so I can have a lot of conversations, but I need to bring back some solutions. We're actually meeting with our mayor on Monday to give her, and we're working with Tim. He's been very great with us in Jacksonville, but my colleague Sandra and I are working and meeting with the mayor on Monday to kind of start this conversation. So anyway, just how do you do it past the 2.5? Let me know.
Liz, did you want to add anything? There's a mic, while the mic's close to you.
Hey everybody, Leon Varnell in Atlanta, Georgia. I run a Main Street program. Fascinating, hyper New York-centric conversation. Hyper New York-centric conversation. My Main Street program does a lot of economic development work, and I explain to people that one of the most eye-opening issues in looking at solutions in LA County relative to the city of Atlanta was that LA County has the same population as the state of Georgia. And, so they have an order of magnitude difference in ARPA funds available to solve problems. And I'm listening to an order of magnitude difference in lots of resource availability, not just capital, but, even when you think about a lack of positive externality solutions never have any real resource to solve problems. Communications is massive. I tell my board all the time that, I need the kind of people on a communication side that take lizards and sell you insurance. Where's my Madison Avenue money? We have really hard communications issues. We have really hard civic engagement issues. We have really hard decentralizing government involvement in neighborhood-focused solution building, all those things. So what's beautiful in this very high-level test case to begin to democratize public space to residents and people, I think one of the more pertinent things is, what was the Brown? Develop a narrative for the field, but also develop a methodology, a place-based methodology for disparate neighborhoods that sit within this country who all want to call their neighborhood their favorite place. They want their home to be the best place ever. They want an open street that their kids can walk to school on. And a lot of us are having really difficult challenges. By the way, Jacksonville is the actual biggest city in the country. Just so you know, it's the literal actual biggest city in the country. It's fascinating. So it is. I'm trying to organize and create something functional and disciplined to take back to Atlanta, where we can begin to learn from these years of trial and error and mistake and the opportunity to fail and learn and grow and change and still lament. Like, everybody still is complaining about something. It's the best part about our jobs, right? We get to complain all the time. We kvetch. Didn't know that was a noun. And a verb. But I would love to begin to actually codify the iterative process of how you guys have gotten to where you are and where we can go as we begin to learn and grow.
Fabulous. I want to hear from Canada, and then we have someone from Philly, I think,
Lily
and then
from Philly.
and then California.
No, we want Canadians too.
I actually did want to respond to Laura. It's Laura, right? To your comment and the idea of like codification, because in again, sorry to keep it New York, but that's only because that's what I know. Is things like legislation, right? Which is like the bid assessment. That is something that you can't change at the whim of an administration. Things like earmarking or baselining in a city's budget. Right, and so one of the ideas that I think is a potential model that exists in New York City is like the Cultural Institutions Group, right? That's the 33, quote, city-owned nonprofit arts organizations that are baselined in the city's budget from year to year. So perhaps there should be something like a public space institutions group or a parks institutions group. Otherwise, we're all sort of susceptible from administration to administration. Or there's like a city charter revision committee happening at this moment. So how can you change the city charter? How can you change the legislation? How can you change the budget so that when there's something precarious like budget negotiations, where parks, there's the 1% for parks on the chopping block, or libraries and all the things, you're actually safeguarded. And then on top of that, you have, you're a business, right? So you have earned revenue from being a concession or being a venue or being a bid, so those things, or looking at your contracts to ensure that your contracts are a 5-year lease, a 10-year lease, maybe even 15, so that you don't have to renew when a new administration is up. You can actually make it through an administration, because that's what happened in New York. A lot of Bloomberg era agreements that were made expired during the de Blasio era, and some of them waited because the terms under the de Blasio administration were not good. And so some of them waited, continuing to provide services absent an agreement, until the Adams administration. Who's going to be the Parks Commissioner, the DOT Commissioner, to be able to potentially have us better? Because otherwise, you're going to just rely on volunteers, which is not sustainable.
And then I'd love to hear from Mexico after Canada.
Okay, I'll keep it really quick. My name is TJ McGuire from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, working out of Toronto with Evergreen Canada, where we're really focused right now on creating public spaces for the health of people and planet. So we're learning a lot. I used to work with the waterfront in Halifax, and through some conferences I met Tamika Butler, and she totally changed my perspective on this concept of empowering and focus on co-powering. Everybody in community has power and they're trying to do something. You're also trying to do things, but how do you do it together and both get what you're trying to need? I have an article, if you want to learn a bit more about me, it's called Love This Town. It's a blog on PPS website. It's 10 lessons for better waterfronts. Happy to chat about it. I have about 20 more. And yeah, there's the Evergreen Conference in October in Toronto. Come on up, and we'll see you there.
I think you want to hear from Guillermo next?
Yeah, if you haven't speak, Nate. Oh, and then John.
Okay.
Go, John.
Okay, well, I just wanted to mention a couple examples of government innovation. What?
Oh, sorry. I'm talking to the girl behind you. No, you go, John.
Government, really quickly. So, and I, in response to the folks from Hort talking about, we have to champion the guerrilla bureaucrats in DOT, in parks, who are just pushing to really make the change. I work as an advocate, as an agitator on the outside. I provide the political cover for public works, for DOT to be able to say, yes, we have community support to do this. We need to push through the bureaucracy. I find those folks in public works, in planning, they're trying to find their loopholes in their own government. I guess, but there has been a couple cases of innovation I want to mention. There's the Ground Play program in San Francisco. It's called When Imagination Goes Public. It's a clearinghouse if you want to do street improvements, parklet program, greening on your street. It's a one-stop shop. Check it out, Ground Play, San Francisco. It's a really great model. Second one I want to mention is from the town of Vancouver. they have a plaza stewardship strategy. So they started encountering this very same thing. We want to use our streets in different ways. How do we really clearly define roles and responsibilities of our community partners, of government, of business? They've done the research and produced this really beautiful plaza stewardship strategy. I just offer that as two really great examples of government innovation. Here's the Ground Play site, really groundbreaking in terms of city government transparency and invitation to activate. Really, really great models. Just wanted to offer those in terms of examples of government innovation.
John, what was the other one? I'll pull it up, sorry. Ground Play and then what?
Vancouver, BC Plaza Stewardship Strategy.
Okay.
I texted it to you earlier.
Hi, I'm Lily Rossi. I work in Old City District Business Improvement District in Philadelphia. And also I wear another hat. I'm a contractor at Merrill Arts. So I want to add two things. First of all, for the maintenance of, like, if the transition of the office, of the new people, what would happen to our projects. It's just, I think some of the, like, the big projects, they are, like, especially since 2026 is coming, and it's like a big year for all of the developments in the city, as Philadelphia is the historic landmark. So many of these projects are just, like, accelerated, and the government wants to keep it going, and the idea is these organizations, they also want to keep it as it is and improve it, and so these partnerships are really important to make sure that this is not like central and the lift is on the government, but also the other organizations, the partners are taking the responsibility of taking care of those spaces after the funding is over. And also the community is very important to make sure that this thing is sustainable. Like, for example, as I'm working for Merrill Arts, I know many murals, like, if they are not like necessarily supported by the community, they will be destroyed or demolished. So it's like complex. There are many people should have like the both part, like I think partners and the community, everyone should like the project and see the vision to be able to keep it going. Unfortunately, I want to add from my experience in like business improvement district, financial problems is we are very small. Like as you were saying, in Chicago, only like one district in Philadelphia, University City District, which is funded by anchor institutions like UPenn, and the hospitals there are able to do much more of placemaking and is kind of recognized by that, but other bids are just doing like mostly cleaning and keep it safe. So that's the problem, like I think financial barriers and also the legislations, like there has been like coalitions between different organizations about the streeteries. Why it's so difficult, why in COVID we had so much parklets for the dining areas, but now the COVID is just like over, we are going back, instead of just like keep it going, we are just going back to as it was before. So these organizations are questioning this, what should we do to make it happen, why this wasn't a good lesson for us to keep the parklets. So there are many complex things going on, but I think as you were saying, the collective power is really important at the end.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Guillermo, and then we're going to have Nate, and then we're going to have Ethan, and then I don't know if Europe wants to give a speech, and then Mike. And then I don't know where we are in terms of time, whether we can go beyond noon. Because then we also want to just start turning the conversation of where do we go from here collectively. Go ahead.
I mean, I come from a city that 12 years ago we developed the first lab for the city that basically where we're doing these kind of roundtables. Every day. There was about many subjects. And then 18 years ago, we built the first public space authority inside the developing department of the city. Was actually creating pilot improvement projects, big projects, small projects, tactical urbanism. Like we were having like the fun. That was the best time of the city. But then 6 years ago, the last government actually disappeared both agencies. And basically because it was too heavy bureaucracy and it was too expensive for the city and many other political issues. So actually the capacity to build an institution, an organization that can go further than a political term, I think is crucial. And I see that happening in my city, and I think, I really believe that the Public Realm Office is the solution. But how can we transcend administration, and how can we transcend the time of just the political will of having an amazing organization running this? And I think that's a message for all cities globally. How can we actually keep those amazing ideas and learn from the mistakes we have made in many other cities? I see Bogota, for example, Sao Paulo, Curitiba, many cities that actually have innovated so well in many subjects, but then a political shift happens and then pretty much everything is gone.
And Guillermo, just to point out two things you've taught me also is that Mexico City does a lot to employ workforce around public space. They're cleaning the street. They have ambassadors, we'll call them, everywhere, and that's a huge sort of social program for workforce development and wealth sharing. But also that thing you pointed out yesterday about co-creation of these spaces and co-management hand in hand with communities, so they understand how they fundamentally work and have relationships to these departments and intermediary agencies, so they can keep the spaces going, and doing things low cost and immediate over doing huge capital Department of Beauty of pretty objects type projects.
Nate, and then Ethan, and then going around.
There we go. Musical mics. I wanted to throw just another model that came up when we were doing research for the book, and we got to hear a little bit more about it at Placemaking Week last week. And it's in DC. It's an organization called District Bridges, and essentially they are another great sort of intermediary organization that's working with on-the-ground main streets that are working in DC to basically take the work that does have economies of scale, that can be made more efficient off of their plates, so that they can focus on the stuff that is inherently inefficient, right? Because a lot of the most important placemaking work, guess what? It's inherently inefficient. There is no way to get an economy of scale there. But what if the admin, what if the comms, what if the legal, what if the permitting, all that stuff could be scaled up to a slightly larger organization that can be a clearinghouse for the on-the-ground groups, and take some of that budget away too from them, so that they're able to focus on the stuff that really matters.
I want to sort of offer some thoughts on how this conversation, how the power and potential of this conversation, how it can connect internationally. But first, I want a quick anecdote, sort of ground it, because all these examples are really grounding, and I might need the pounder for that. But so yesterday, I had to miss the tours because I went to my son's middle school, where it took us 3 years to finally do a block party, and working with the principal, and she, so many frustrating things throughout those 3 years. But the funniest one that we learned about yesterday was that they wanted to have a dunk tank. All the high schoolers wanted to dunk their teachers, and the city said that you need a lifeguard for the dunk tank, and you need a way to drain the dunk tank afterwards. So anyway, so the principal was very frustrated about that, but it was we did dunk the teachers, and it was really satisfying. So, so this conversation is really such a blessing, and so many people I've wanted to meet and learn from for forever. This place governance topic, thanks to Tim's leadership on it, has really been sort of the biggest cross-cutting topic globally in the placemaking movement. And Guillermo organized a global summit that a lot of people here were at in November, with 40 different cross-cutting agendas. But this really is how we support and advance placemaking at all scales. And since the beginning of Project for Public Spaces, public space management has always been the limiting factor for public spaces. And there's been lots of innovations, by people here to advance that. But I think the limiting factor is how we network that, how we network our stories, how we're not alone doing that work. So that's really what we're trying to help facilitate globally. And I will say there's never going to be the language or the solution set that's cookie cutter, but there's a trajectory towards moving in the same direction. And how we learn to tell our stories together and see ourselves as part of sort of a reinventing of governance, democracy, local economies from the place scale up. how we are able to more seamlessly draw on each other and tell each other's stories and bring each other in at the right times is really key. You know, there's been a good momentum in looking at cities as leading the world. Nation states aren't doing so well right now, but at the place level, this is where we're really grounded in what matters most, to how we connect to each other, how we work together to build our civilization. And these models are the greatest, limiting factor, but the greatest opportunity of innovation in a way of how society is evolving. So, but every part of the world, one of the reasons we network the movement globally is there are 30 networks in every corner of the world, Mongolia, and you name it. There's amazing people like this doing this kind of work. Is because they're all coming from different strengths and different weaknesses. And the strengths they're coming at it from are also blocking too. So just with place governance, it's always about diversifying who's participating, the governance, the financing, the thinking behind it. We have to do that at all scales. So it's always keeping each other in check, balancing this. This is really powerful. And just to end, we're really lucky to have Tim leading this. He didn't introduce himself, so I'm going to say a couple of quick things about his. People don't know that he started partnerships for parks. So he started partnerships for parks, and developed a lot of the parks models that have innovated. And while he was leading Times Square Alliance, which is the most challenging bid in the city in many ways, he supported the bid alliance for the city, helping to build capacity and get smaller bids and other community-based organizations to do placemaking. And now he's been leading this conversation very generously, citywide and nationally and globally. And I forgot to mention he was board chair of IDA forever too, pushing them in many of these directions. So we're very lucky to have him doing this work. So
well, a lot of people are working on these governance issues. So it's just great to have this conversation that all of you pulled together. Mike, then Lex, and then Sara, and then just any closing comments about where we might go from here, including, share information if you want to be a part of the conversation, if you're interested in particularly going into deep dive on these things, whether it's about narrative or something else. And then, of course, I'll share that with other folks here. Mike?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to go back to Jacksonville. Hi. So can you just tell me quickly why things are ending? Is it end of term for the mayor? Termed out, basically?
So the way it works in Jacksonville is not mayor. It's 4 years, and then he or she has the ability to run again. Our prior administration was very wonderful, gave much money. Oh, I'm sorry, microphone. Sorry, Tim. So sorry. So the way that it works, we have a strong mayor. They can have 2 4-year terms. Our prior administration was wonderful, put a bunch of money in the CIP for all these iconic parks to be built in our downtown space, destination parks. It's fantastic. No money is in the CIP for maintenance, operation, activations, CIP capital improvement. So there are a lot of people in Jacksonville who understand the importance and need, and it's kind of like this guerrilla movement, let's figure it out. That does not always work very effectively in Jacksonville. Sure. And so we have a bid in our downtown. So our downtown's 4 square miles. The bid takes care of about 1.9 of those miles. Okay. We do have a downtown investment authority, which is the CRA. Tax increment dollars from that come in. We are in the middle of this huge resurgence where there's this whole conversation on how does downtown continue to grow. You got to understand, we were consolidated in the late 60s. Our river was polluted until 74. No one cared about downtown. I'm 3rd generation. I have my parents from my grandparents and my parents, all that fun stuff, right? So we are like starting from 1974. Sure. Okay. So it's 2024. We are a baby.
So I think the continuity question is one we always struggle with, because when we come into a community to work, where are they in that political cycle? And like on the extreme, in a place like New Haven, which is a wonderful place, they have elections every 2 years for 32 alders over like 14 square miles. So like little fiefdoms change every 2 years. That's extreme. But what I think there is, sorry to bring it back to New York, a lesson here that's helpful and doing even more than what's been done in New York is to organize politically, become a constituency that's known politically, that future electeds have to answer to. And here, that's Streets PAC. So Streets PAC does fundraising and vets candidates on the issues of public realm. I think you could actually expand their mission and talk about public realm like libraries and everything else that impacts our public lives here in the city, and not just focus on between the curbs or whatnot. But like that is a model that I've seen introduced in Philadelphia. I'm not sure to how much success in Philly, but it's the only other place I know of an organized political constituency that's trying to get the next politicians to support the agenda. So that's maybe a tool or something to think about organizing with all the people who get it, and pull them together to raise some funds and back good candidates.
And just to bump that up, I've met with the leaders of the national bike movement, and they said the same exact thing. Stop being C3s and become C4 and actually get at the table where the money is and make stuff happen. And they've been, I think, more successful than the place movement in activating a national scale transformation, as you see if you're riding a city bike maybe last night to a Chinese restaurant.
StreetsPAC's record is quite good on success. When they back a candidate, they usually get elected.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the good things is that massive progressive transportation constituency in the last 10 years some were always there. I mean, Fred was talking, your father was talking about it 30 years ago, but they are public space advocates in a way that they weren't before, which really broadens our political strength, which is one of the reasons for sort of constructing a narrative that resonates across those different categories.
I'm Lex. Compared to New York, I'm living in a very big village in a small country called Amsterdam. And that's maybe also a reason why I have a different look on rules. And I had also some ideas about funding, but maybe that's something for another day. What I heard is a lot of how can we fit as placemakers in the system instead of the other way around. How can the system fit in our work? And during this morning, I had some ideas coming up because I'm also in Amsterdam. I don't follow the rules most of the time. Maybe that's Amsterdam, but so one of the things that I thought about for the permits, instead of making what now everything is forbidden unless, make everything allowed unless. So even, especially for organizations who already proven that they do very good jobs and do it not every time of every year, ask for new permissions, just show what you've done before. So that's one. And in Amsterdam, we have the rule that if you make a daily event, and there will be up to 250 people, you only have to have a notification, not a permit. Even if we organize an event where we do expect 350 people, we just do a notification. And if there will be 350 people, it's a huge success. So we didn't expect that. So that's also be some creative with the rules. And I don't know if it's allowed here, but it's also not allowed in Amsterdam. So just try it. And that's also my motto from don't ask permission, just ask for forgiveness. And because we're all making the city better and nicer, so who can complain about it? So.
Are there any people who have not had a chance to speak yet who we could hear from?
Dorian. I see Dorian from Atlanta.
Dorian, and then you still have a point you want to make, right?
And Britt from the Borough of Brooklyn President's Office.
Hi, thank you everyone. I'm Britt Bird. I work for an elected official. I'm senior planner for Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso. In brief, I would love to have these asks and these possible solutions sent to us and to be advocated for these changes. The borough president would love to continue to be an ally for public spaces and activations like this. I'm gathering that part of the solution is building in-house capacity in the city government itself, and part of it is boosting support for public-private partnerships. The BP published a comprehensive plan for Brooklyn last year, and we're looking on really elaborating and building that out. In particular, we have one framework entirely about healthy streets that we're going to be working on for this year and probably a little bit of next year. I would love to include a lot of this information, and I'm very interested in how this also interacts with the new office of the Public Realm officer, and try to pursue those ideas. Jim, I'm definitely going to look up your testimony for streamlining some things, but really it's just an invitation to please send these asks to our office and other Brooklyn electeds as well.
I just wanted to resonate off of what Mike said, and also the media gentleman in his hat. I like to picture the center of this as, maybe we're the placemakers, but in the middle there's the place users. And I remember when the Bloomberg administration was ending, Mike Bloomberg is an intriguing guy when, after his 12 years were running out, and in all the agencies, he put up a ticking time clock we were counting the seconds down to the end of his administration. He put that up 2 years before he was out of office. And the entire agenda was, how do we sustain what we have started? And it was true that under Bloomberg, we could start some extraordinary things because the man had purse strings to pull. So a lot had been started. A lot of new parks, bike paths, and plazas. And I remember getting called into Sara Khan's office, who was running it, and she said, we're on our way out. What can we do to make sure that plazas and bike paths continue? So, that focus right there, and it was about how can we have a political voice? That's not why we were at the table. We were at how can we make what we have started so fabulous over the next 2 years and document it? Have media cover it? How can we make this a conversation that the people who we all are trying to create the public space for stand up and say, don't take away my plaza? And it was actually a campaign, and it worked. Because one of the things we also hear is, I'm sure all of you in this, you hear the other side. We almost had to shut down open streets because of a lawsuit from people who can't get to their house. So you don't hear that, but we hear we're being sued, everybody's being sued, Jim's being sued, we're all being sued because somebody, and I understand it, somebody with a disability can't get to their home. The power to shut down an entire new concept. So I really hope we get more media. I really hope that more of these we can get to the place where we've got political activity, and that the voice of people dancing in our plazas and using our open streets actually is heard.
Okay, I'm Dorian McDuffie again. I'm sorry, clap. Woo, for you, not me. I'm Dorian McDuffie with the City of Atlanta, Department of City Planning. I presented yesterday and talked about an exhibit I did on Peachtree Street that Mike's group actually helped implement later, that got shut down because although Atlanta is typically known as kind of a left-leaning, let's say, black-ruled city, the truth is that the money is not black, it's white, and whatever the government, which leans very much to the right, wants, that's what happens. And someone from the state government owned one of the high-rises on Peachtree Street and said that he would put in a bill to stop any shared spaces or shared streets in the entire state if we move forward with our project. So I like what you just said about creating a PAC. I like what Luano said about having like a media coalition around your projects. I think, we're so deep in the weeds of just getting the thing done. We're not thinking at that level until there's a crisis and we have federal funding for this project that we still have to figure out how to spend because someone, had a bigger voice than a million, not a million, but several thousand, a lot of people, because we did have, the Bicycle Coalition kind of stood up for us. So like Ryan was saying, they're very well organized. That's who stood up for us in the end. We got a little media coverage from that, but ultimately the project was shut down.
So we're coming to the end. I want to, I want to thank David Burney, I don't see him here, but for hosting this, for Ryan and Ethan from the placemaking folks for being so generous in terms of sourcing and opening up the conversation, for Nate and Brookings for putting some really substantive, critical questions out there and introducing the idea of governance and funding and hyperlocal entities as like a category of thing to really be thought about and nurtured, and so many other folks here. It sounds like
Madeline there.
Close.
So you had asked us for a suggestion, Tim, and I just want to bring up something. Right now, I know that this conversation is being recorded, and I also know that there's something called AI, and I would love to see as an action this conversation be transcribed, number one, and be organized, and anyone who spoke here and who is interested can do exactly what's done in the IDA policy briefs, where maybe everybody's given 3 pages, and we put it together as a conversation, as it is, and as a book that can be given out after the thing. And I think that's the fastest way that we can take this information and continue the dialogue. And I'm just saying, like, we have all the tools, guys. Like, this is not hard.
Great specific follow-up suggestion. And we can have a medieval AI generated visual to go.
Ye old AI generator. Yeah, so thank you guys so much for this very stimulating conversation. When you speak at Placemaking India, at the end, they either give you a bouquet of flowers or sometimes you get a bag of almonds, the brand of which is called Are You Nuts? And so I just wanted to present Tim with these New York tulips for the great job that he did today leading this session. So give him a round of applause.
Let's eat and place make and place keep.
And so for those of us joining, this has been incredibly interesting and unique for us. We don't usually do that much in session like this, but because of the generosity of David Burney from Pratt and from Yating who brought us together, and Blaze who opened up his little black book of amazing public space managers, we thought this was really an important conversation to network with our global partners and other cities across the US. So I really appreciate all of you coming. We're not through yet. We're going to go back out there the next few days and really look at this stuff and test it in field and see from the ground up, what's working, what's broken, what needs to be fixed. And so after this, there is a lunch with the city folks as well as the design firms who created the new outdoor dining rules in New York City. Now, on your agendas and stuff, it says we're meeting at Bread's Bakery, but Ed Janoff from Union Square panically sent me an email that there's like some construction around there and they just want you guys to have the best experience. So let's meet there, and then we may walk to one of 2 other options nearby. If you're not on the WhatsApp, I'm going to pull it up because when we go places, I always put my tracker on and you can kind of track where we're at, if we have started walking or things like that and you need to find us. That's a great communication tool. There's also great photos being dumped on there, all throughout this process. So we're doing today the Dining Sheds talk. Then we'll be reconvening with Emily from DOT and walking the Broadway corridor transformation, which is a really, really awesome and amazing scale of what people are talking about in this transformation. And then there's some gatherings tonight for those of you guys who are able to RSVP for that. Okay, yeah, tell them we said hello and goodbye and thank you very much. And then we don't want to make them too jealous, okay? And that's also something important to note is there was dozens of other cities online watching this conversation thanks to our amazing streaming partner here.